Syracuse football needs a cornerback badly.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, Syracuse football needs a cornerback, maybe even two in the transfer portal, really, really badly. Okay? That's what we're talking about here on this edition of Locked On Syracuse. Jayden Bellamy, a starting corner from last season, entered the portal recently. We're also going to talk about the current cornerback room as it is. And then I do have one portal target in mind with a Syracuse connection. All that and more here on this edition of Locked On Syracuse. Before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. The College Football Playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff presented by Allstate begins with 4 first-round games, December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. So, just a couple of days ago, Jayden Bellamy entered the transfer portal per himself. He released a statement on Twitter. Now, there is definitely a huge need at corner for Syracuse in the transfer portal. Jayden Bellamy played in 10 games for Syracuse this season and 12 games in 2023. Bellamy has 3 career interceptions, 2 pick sixes, I might add. One came in 2023 against Pitt, and the other one came against Holy Cross this season. According to Pro Football Focus, Jayden Bellamy had the 5th highest grade on Syracuse and was second among full-time starters. So Jayden Bellamy was a pretty important piece of Syracuse's defense this past season. This is not ideal that he is in the transfer portal because, A, he was a productive corner, and now the Orange are down their 3 top cornerbacks from last season. Just talked about Jayden Bellamy, gave you a brief rundown of his career with Syracuse. Obviously, I just want to say this. I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he finds what he's looking for in the transfer portal. And who knows? It'd be awesome if he can come back as well, because you can always come back in the transfer portal. But let's just assume he's not. Okay? He's in the portal and he's leaving. Let's assume that. Here's who else is gone from Syracuse's cornerback room. You got Clarence Lewis. Clarence Lewis is out of college eligibility. He was a Notre Dame transfer from last offseason. They got him in April. They either got him right before the spring game or right after the spring game. I think it was before the spring game. When they originally got him, I actually did a mini podcast on Clarence Lewis, and you can go back and check the archives of it. I thought he was going to be maybe a depth corner from Notre Dame. That's what I thought he was going to be, which is no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. I thought he was just depth, but he was much better than that. He was Syracuse's number 1 corner for basically every game this season. He played in every game, and guess what? He was actually productive in those games. Lewis was voted 3rd team All-ACC this season. What does that mean? It means he was regarded as a top 6 cornerback in the conference. Think about it. There's 17 teams in the conference. On average, a team is going to start 2 corners. Right? So that's 34 starting cornerbacks in one conference. They voted Clarence Lewis as one of the 6 best. He's pretty good. He's not going to be easy to replace. It would have been nice to have Jayden Bellamy there, but he's not coming back either. And the other guy that's leaving is Marcellus Barnes. He's in the transfer portal as well. Marcellus Barnes was a 4-star top 200 high school player in the 2024 recruiting class. And he looked like he could be a potential building block for this team in the future. And the moment that I keep replaying in my head is when at the beginning of the Stanford game, week 3 of this season, he was traveling with Alec Iomanner, their incredibly talented wide receiver. Best player on Stanford by a mile. He was traveling with him in the early portion of that game, but he left that game early due to injury. And Io Manor, for what it's worth, did the majority of his damage when Barnes was out of the game. And injuries limited Barnes to just 5 games overall. So he was kind of hurt. But you know what? Top 200 player in high school, was pretty good in those 5 games. He could have been the number 1 corner this upcoming season, but he's in the portal. So now, when you look at Syracuse's cornerback room, the corners specifically, they definitely need to add one. You need to add at least one starting corner in the portal because your top 3 guys from last year are gone. And trust me, on the next segment, we're going to examine the current quarterback or cornerback room, I should say. But they need to add at least one. And honestly, if they can add 2, even better. So bottom line, Syracuse football definitely needs a corner in the transfer portal after Jayden Bellamy recently entered it. Now, I do have some good news, though. I do have some good news before we transition to the next segment here. They're fine at safety. They're fine. They're good. They don't have to worry about it. That's why I'm not talking about defensive backs in this podcast. They're good at safety, okay? Yes, Elijah Clark is out of eligibility. He's not coming back. But you still have Deuce Chestnut. You still have Devin Grant. And the number 1 rated prospect in Syracuse's 2025 recruiting class, a consensus 4-star player, Demetrius Samuel Jr., guess what, guys? He's a safety. So you can almost plug and play with Elijah Clark. So they're good there. I don't think they need a safety. Maybe you add someone from depth, but you don't need a safety. That's why on this podcast, we are solely talking about the cornerbacks. So overall, Jayden Bellamy, I wish him nothing but the best. He was a productive player for Syracuse. Whoever gets him is going to be very happy that they got him. But bottom line for the Orange now, cornerback certainly needs to be a priority in the portal because coming up, we're going to talk about the current cornerback room. And the options, they are not great. Let's talk about it. It's that time of the year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports' coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. That leads into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. And folks, Jayden Bellamy is in the transfer portal. He was one of the starting corners for Syracuse football this past season. The Orange, as it stands currently, their top 3 corners from last year are gone. Clarence Lewis out of eligibility, Marcellus Barnes and Jayden Bellamy both in the transfer portal. So when you look at Syracuse's current cornerback room, which is what we're about to do here, you will probably come to the same realization that Syracuse needs to add 1, possibly even 2 corners in the transfer portal. You can honestly even make an argument that it is now the number 1 need on defense. It's either corner or it's linebacker. It's one of the 2. So let's talk about the possible depth chart as it stands right now, December 19th at 3:33 p.m. Eastern when I'm recording this. You got Davian Kerr. He was a true freshman this past season. Kerr played in 7 games. Kerr had an interception against Cal. And if I recall correctly, he started that game against Cal because another player, another corner, had disciplinary issues. So he did not start the game. It was Davian Kerr who took his spot. And Coach Fran Brown actually said after the game that he basically used the Wally Pipp reference. For those that don't know that reference, it refers to a player getting an opportunity due to an unforeseen circumstance. And then that kid or that player who gets that opportunity ends up just thriving. And Coach Fran Brown used that analogy, that reference when referring to Davian Kerr's start against Cal. Maybe Davian Kerr, the plan is that he is going to be a starting corner. It's possible. I mean, he was a true freshman, played in 7 games. He got to start against Cal, so he's got some experience, I guess. And he's young. That's the key. He's young. Because that means he's got more room to grow. Sound fair enough? So if you want to make an argument that Davian Kerr is going to take the next step and be a starting corner, fine. But as we get down the depth chart, you are going to realize they need to add at least one sure thing in here, maybe even 2. Let's talk about Greg Delane. Greg Delane, he's going to be a redshirt junior. Delane has experience. That's what he's got going for him. He's played in 22 games for Syracuse the past 2 seasons. However, Greg Delane doesn't have a lot of starting experience. Delane started 1 game in 2023, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see anything out there that stated that he started a game in 2024. So by my count, that would mean he's got 1 start in 2 years. What does that tell me? And what should that tell you? Well, he's going to be a redshirt junior, so he's had plenty of time to grow over college. Greg Delane, he profiles more to be just a depth corner. That's probably where he's best at. Right now, you can make an argument he's penciled in to be the cornerback 1 or the cornerback 2. They need a corner. Who else does Syracuse got? Well, you got Caleb Singleton. Caleb Singleton, a 2025 Rivals 4-star commit. He's 6'1", 175 pounds. Caleb Singleton rates across the 4 major recruiting services. Those are On3, ESPN, 24/7 Sports, and Rivals. Singleton rates between the 32nd and the 68th best cornerback in high school across the nation. So in theory, he's a pretty good cornerback prospect. You could start him in his true freshman season, very similar to what they did with Marcellus Barnes. Barnes was a very talented high school prospect. They started him right away. It could be the same thing with Singleton, but there's a little catch here. See, Marcellus Barnes was a better high school recruit. That's just the way to put it. He was a better high school recruit. Marcellus Barnes, for context, was rated between the 23rd and the 46th best cornerback in the country. So he had a much higher range than Singleton. You could do it. You could start the true freshman right away. It's not unheard of. You probably prefer to redshirt, though. Who knows? But that's my point. You're already looking at the 3rd corner in Caleb Singleton right now. Need one. Then you got Marcus Washington. Marcus Washington's pretty interesting, folks. He was a 2022 4-star Georgia commit. Fran Brown was there. Obviously, he was the defensive backs coach at Georgia during that time. He played in 1 game in his true freshman season. Then he transferred to Louisville in 2023. He played the entire season at Louisville. There's just a kicker here. He didn't play at corner. This was not someone who was a depth corner or a starting corner at Louisville in 2023. He only played in 4 snaps on defense. He was primarily used on special teams. He transferred to Syracuse last offseason. However, I want to say it was in August, he got surgery on a torn bicep and did not play this season. But he's coming back, and I believe he will have 3 years of eligibility remaining because you get the red shirt in 2022 and you get an injury year in 2024. And you can make an argument that Washington, he's got some upside. You can make that argument. Sure, I'll listen to you on that. But can you really bank on him being a starting corner? Really? Is that what you're telling me? I'm not so sure, friends. I don't know. So what's the depth chart as of right now at cornerback? You got Davian Kerr. You got Greg Delane. You got Caleb Singleton, the true freshman. And you got Marcus Washington. The theme of that is you don't have a sure thing. You don't. You don't know who your number 1 corner is. You don't know your number 2. You don't know your number 3, and you do not know your number 4. It's those 4, in my opinion. There might be someone I'm leaving out, and if I'm leaving someone out, I apologize. But by my count, that's what it is. So, with Jayden Bellamy gone, Marcellus Barnes gone, Clarence Lewis out of eligibility, Syracuse desperately needs to add one, maybe even two cornerbacks in the transfer portal. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse. We are talking about the cornerback room for the Orange right now and how they desperately need one or maybe even two in the portal. Now, coming up, we do have a solution, potentially. There's one guy that I am eyeing in the portal that could make sense for Syracuse, and he does have a connection to the Orange. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Syracuse football is scheduled to play in the Holiday Bowl against Washington State on December 27th. There's a whole lot of opt-outs for Washington State, and trust me, FanDuel has recognized that. The Orange started out as 6.5-point favorites, which sounded about right. They are now 13.5-point favorites. The line has moved by a touchdown in Syracuse's favor. Big reason why? Well, Kyle McCord's playing for the Orange. John Mateer, the top quarterback at Washington State, well, he transferred to Oklahoma, so he ain't playing. So it's a 13.5-point line. What do you think of those odds? Well, you can be the judge for yourself at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks, and Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. I think it's fair to say that Syracuse football needs a starting cornerback, and we have addressed that throughout the process together. I told you guys the top three corners are all gone from this past season. We also looked at the current cornerback room, and the theme of it is there's no sure thing, and they need to add a sure thing in the transfer portal. So now, let's go over a possible option. Before we get to that, though, I want to start off this segment by saying this. I have not seen Syracuse be linked to any corner in the transfer portal, at least publicly. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not working behind the scenes. I'm sure they are, but I just haven't seen it leaked that there's a corner that the Orange are looking at. I mean, Julian Humphrey was the guy that everyone was kind of eyeing, the talented Georgia corner. He didn't even get an offer from Syracuse, and he actually committed to Texas A&M. So he's not an option. So let's go over the possible target. And I was looking for a Syracuse connection. Is there a chance? Is there something there? And we found one. I got one for you, okay? Josh Moten, 6 foot, 165-pound corner, a 4-star Marshall transfer with 1 year of eligibility left as I readjust myself. He is currently a top 10 corner in the transfer portal on On3 and 24/7 Sports. Moten has been with Marshall the past 2 seasons, and he tied the conference lead, which is the Sun Belt Conference, in interceptions with 5. So this is a pretty good corner, and I am sure he is going to be highly sought after, and there are a lot of teams probably interested in a guy like Josh Moten. So there's got to be some sort of connection. It's very easy to look up and say, the number one guy, let's go get him. Cool. Is there a connection? If there's not, it's probably not going to happen. But with Moten, there is. Before Moten was at Marshall, guess what school he was at? 1, 2, 3. It was Texas A&M. Why do I bring that up? Well, he was a class of 2020 guy in high school, and his secondary recruiter in high school at Texas A&M was none other than Elijah Robinson, the current defensive coordinator at Syracuse University. So there's a connection with Josh Moten here. And Moten is the best corner available that Syracuse has a clear connection with. Outside of Moten, the cornerback Martin is pretty thin. The market is thin on corners. Of the top 25 corners available on 24/7 Sports, only 7 are currently available. Only 7 of them have not committed. One of them is Marcellus Barnes. So really, it's better to say 6 of 24. They need a corner. And this kid from Marshall, Josh Moten, I think he would be an awesome addition. 4-star guy. There's a connection from A&M with Elijah Robinson, now with Syracuse. Well, there you have it. I hope Elijah Robinson didn't throw out his number. I doubt it. So let's hope that Syracuse can get involved with Moten. As far as what is coming up on the podcast, actually, let me take a step back. As far as what has already happened on the podcast, we got a lot that happened today, okay? I did a mini podcast earlier on Syracuse's new wide receiver, Chris Long Jr. from Rutgers, so you can go check that out from earlier in the day. Also, ACC Squad was at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern. You can check that out when you're done watching or listening to this. Now let's get into what's coming up on the podcast in the future, okay? Tomorrow, there is one thing that's definite, but I think it's going to be safe to say that I'm going to do multiple shows on Friday. But the only thing that's definite is Poll Friday, which is a basketball show, because I got to mix in a little bit of basketball here. Will Adrian Autry be the head coach of Syracuse basketball next season? The key word is will. Not should, will. So that's what I'm going to talk about on Poll Friday tomorrow. Other possible podcasts to potentially look out for here. Not going to guarantee it, but just keep an eye out. Trevor Pena, he's staying. Aronde Gadsden, he's leaving. So I could do a little mini podcast pairing the two together. The other one that I'm thinking about doing, I might do this. In fact, maybe I even release it tonight. I haven't recorded, but I might release this one tonight, which is about Kyle McCord. I did a mini podcast about Kyle McCord and his potential way to get a year of eligibility, and I reported that the university is trying. Well, Kyle McCord on Q Sports Talk, he didn't exactly shut it down. In fact, he might have poured gasoline on the fire right now. So we can go over what McCord said on Q Sports Talk and whether or not he can get another year of eligibility. On Saturday, Syracuse basketball is back in action. They are playing in Brooklyn against Maryland at noon Eastern. Win, lose, or draw, there will be a full post-game reaction podcast. So that's what has happened and what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs, they keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. You can find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast, which who knows? It could be tonight. It could be tomorrow morning. That's why you need to put on those notifications. But regardless, everyone, take care.